This university cashier looked at my account and quietly shook her head. I already knew what she was about to say, but hearing the words still felt like a punch to the chest. My tuition deadline had arrived, and I was short by almost $4,000. Unless I found the money within 10 days, I would lose my place at the university and watch 2 years of hard work disappear. I thanked her and walked out of the administration building with a heavy feeling in my stomach. Students passed by carrying books, laughing with friends, and discussing their plans for the future. Usually, I enjoyed the energy of the campus, but that afternoon it felt different. Everyone seemed to be moving forward while I stood still. My name was Aria Whitmore. I was 22 years old and studying business management in a large city nearly 300 miles from my hometown. My parents owned a small repair shop that had supported our family for years, but business had become difficult. Rising costs and fewer customers had placed them under constant pressure. 3 months earlier, my father injured his shoulder while lifting heavy equipment. The injury was not permanent, but it prevented him from working full-time. The shop's income dropped immediately, and my parents started using their savings to cover basic expenses. When I learned about their situation, I stopped asking for financial help. I knew they were already carrying enough responsibility. Still, knowing the truth did not make my own situation easier. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment looking through my finances. The numbers refused to improve no matter how many times I checked them. I already worked 25 hours each week at a bookstore near campus. My rent was paid. My groceries were covered. However, university tuition was a much larger challenge. For a few minutes, frustration took control of my thoughts. I wondered why some people seemed to receive opportunities so easily while others had to fight for every small step forward. Then I remembered something my mother often told me. Life was not a competition against other people. It was a test of how well you handled your own circumstances. Comparing myself to students with wealthy families would not solve anything. The only useful question was what I planned to do next. The following morning, I started searching for solutions. I applied for additional scholarships. I looked for extra work. I contacted several financial aid offices. Most replies were disappointing. Some programs had already closed applications. Others required qualifications I did not have. Every rejection made the deadline feel closer. A week later, I received an email from the university. At first, I assumed it was another rejection. Instead, it informed me that I had been selected for a private scholarship interview funded by the Graves Foundation. The message explained that only 12 students had been chosen from hundreds of applicants. I read the email 3 times before believing it. For the first time in days, I felt a small sense of hope. The interview took place in a modern office building overlooking the city skyline. Everything about the place suggested success. The lobby contained polished marble floors, elegant artwork, and enormous windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. As I entered the waiting area, I immediately noticed the other candidates. Most wore expensive clothing and carried themselves with confidence. Their conversations focused on internships, business connections, and professional opportunities. For a moment, self-doubt crept into my mind. My suit was several years old. I had purchased it from a second-hand store before my first university presentation. Compared to everyone else, I felt out of place. Then I reminded myself that appearances rarely revealed the full story. Confidence built on preparation usually lasted longer than confidence built on expensive clothes. That thought helped me relax. A few minutes later, the conference room door opened. A tall man stepped into the waiting area. He appeared to be around 35 years old and wore an expensive dark suit. His sharp features and serious expression immediately drew attention. Several candidates straightened in their chairs as he walked past. The man introduced himself as Preston Hale. He explained that he managed operations for the Graves Foundation and would assist with the interview process. Everything about him seemed professional, yet something felt strange. His smile never reached his eyes. As he spoke, he appeared more interested in observing people than welcoming them. After several minutes, another figure entered the room. The atmosphere changed instantly. Conversation stopped. Several staff members stood up. Even Preston's expression shifted slightly. The newcomer was an elderly man with silver hair and calm blue eyes. He moved slowly but confidently, carrying himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to responsibility. I recognized him immediately. Leonard Graves, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. Newspapers often referred to him as the old billionaire. What surprised me most was the reaction around him. People respected him. That much was obvious. Yet there was also something else, a strange tension. A few employees avoided eye contact entirely. Others watched him carefully before returning to work. I could not understand why. Leonard greeted several staff members before entering a nearby office. As he passed through the room, his gaze briefly met mine. For some reason, he paused. Only for a second. Then he continued walking. I noticed Preston watching the interaction. His expression hardened for a moment before returning to normal. The change was small, but it caught my attention. An hour later, my name was called. Inside the interview room sat Leonard Graves and two foundation directors. I expected questions about grades and academic achievements. Instead, Leonard asked something completely different. He wanted to know about the hardest decision I had ever made. The question surprised me. After a moment, I told him about my family. I explained how my parents struggled financially and how difficult it felt watching them sacrifice so much. I described my attempts to balance university, work, and personal responsibilities without becoming overwhelmed. The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Leonard asked about failures. He asked about setbacks. He asked about mistakes. More importantly, he wanted to know what those experiences had taught me. As the interview progressed, I began to understand his reasoning. Skills could be learned. Knowledge could be taught. Character revealed itself through adversity. Anyone could appear confident when life was easy. Difficult circumstances often showed who a person truly was. When the interview ended, Leonard thanked me for my honesty. As I stood to leave, my attention drifted toward a framed photograph on a shelf behind his desk. The picture showed Leonard standing beside a young woman around my age. She had dark hair, a warm smile, and intelligent eyes. Something about the photograph felt important. Before I could look more closely, Leonard quietly turned the frame face down. The movement was subtle, but I noticed it. A shadow crossed his expression for the first time during our conversation, and as I walked out of the room, I could not stop wondering who the young woman was and why a man as powerful as Leonard Graves seemed unable to look at her photograph for more than a few seconds. Before I share the rest of the story, I need to know, where are you listening from? I would love to hear from you. For the rest of the day, I could not stop thinking about the photograph. There had been something unusual about Leonard's reaction. The moment he noticed me looking at the picture, his expression changed completely. Until then, he had appeared calm and confident. For a brief second, however, I saw sadness in his eyes. The image stayed in my mind during my shift at the bookstore. That evening, customers came and went while I organized shelves and processed purchases. But my thoughts kept returning to the interview. I told myself it was none of my business. Still, curiosity remained. 3 days later, I received another email from the Graves Foundation. My hands shook as I opened it. I had been selected. Not only would the scholarship cover my tuition, but it would also provide financial support for books, housing expenses, and academic materials until graduation. For several moments, I simply stared at the screen. The pressure that had followed me for months finally began to lift. I immediately called my parents. My mother cried before I could finish explaining the news. My father remained quiet at first. Then he congratulated me in a voice filled with pride. That conversation meant more to me than the scholarship itself. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. A week later, I attended an orientation meeting for scholarship recipients. During the event, Leonard announced that selected students would participate in a mentorship program designed to prepare them for future careers. The room filled with excitement. Many students saw Leonard as a business legend. The opportunity to learn directly from him felt almost impossible to believe. After the presentation ended, I noticed Preston standing near the back of the room. While everyone else appeared enthusiastic, he looked annoyed. His expression disappeared quickly when he realized I was watching. The moment felt strange, but I pushed the thought aside. Over the following months, my life changed dramatically. Without constant financial stress, I could finally focus on my studies. My grades improved. I became more involved in university projects. Most importantly, I gained access to mentorship sessions with Leonard. Those meetings rarely focused on business strategies. Leonard spoke about decision-making, responsibility, and long-term thinking. One afternoon, he told us something that stayed with me. According to him, many people spent years searching for extraordinary opportunities while ignoring ordinary responsibilities. Yet the people who consistently handled small responsibilities often became the ones trusted for larger opportunities. Later, the lesson sounded simple. However, the more I thought about it, the more true it seemed. Success rarely arrived through one dramatic moment. More often, it grew from hundreds of small choices made consistently over time. Several weeks later, Leonard invited a small group of students to attend a charity gala hosted by the foundation. The event would raise money for educational programs across the country. I had never attended anything like it before. The ballroom looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers reflected golden light across the room. Guests wore elegant suits and expensive dresses. Business leaders, politicians, and investors filled the space with conversation. As Leonard introduced us to various guests, I noticed something interesting. Successful people openly discussed their failures. One entrepreneur described losing his first company. Another spoke about years of rejection before achieving success. Their stories reminded me that setbacks were not signs of weakness. In many cases, they were simply part of growth. Near the end of the evening, Leonard introduced me to a group of executives. Among them stood Preston. The moment Leonard walked away to greet another guest, Preston turned toward me. His smile appeared polite, but there was tension beneath it. He asked several questions about my studies and scholarship. Although his words sounded friendly, the conversation felt more like an investigation than a casual discussion. Before leaving, he made a comment that stayed with me. He said some opportunities changed people's lives faster than they deserved. The remark sounded harmless on the surface, yet something about his tone made me uncomfortable. I spent the rest of the evening trying to forget it. Unfortunately, that would not be possible. A few days later, strange things began happening on campus. Students who normally greeted me suddenly seemed distant. Conversations stopped when I approached. Several people stared openly. At first, I assumed I was imagining it. Then messages started appearing on my phone. Someone had published anonymous posts online. The posts claimed my scholarship had nothing to do with academic performance. According to the rumors, Leonard had chosen me for personal reasons. The accusations spread quickly. Within days of students had seen them, reading those comments felt like being punished for something I had never done. The scholarship represented years of hard work, yet strangers who knew nothing about my life seemed eager to believe the worst. For I struggled emotionally. Then I remembered something Leonard often said. You cannot control every opinion, but you can control your response. Arguing with anonymous people would accomplish nothing. The only thing I could do was continue proving myself through my actions, so I focused on my studies. I continued attending classes. I kept working toward my goals. Eventually, most people lost interest in the rumors. Then another opportunity appeared. The Graves Foundation announced a nationwide competition for university students. Participants would present innovative solutions to educational challenges. The winning project would receive substantial funding and national support. Immediately, I knew I wanted to enter. I spent weeks researching problems affecting students from low-income families. The project gradually evolved into a mentorship network connecting experienced professionals with students who lacked guidance and career support. The idea felt personal because it reflected my own journey. As the competition approached, I worked harder than ever. Late one evening, while reviewing materials at the foundation offices, I accidentally entered the wrong conference room. The lights were off. Only a small desk lamp illuminated the space. There, sitting alone, was Leonard. In front of him lay dozens of photographs. At the center of the sat the same picture I had seen during my interview. The young woman from the frame, Leonard was staring at it silently. And before he noticed me standing there, I heard him quietly speak her name. Alina. The sound of that single name stopped me in my tracks. I had never seen Leonard look vulnerable before. Every time we met, he carried himself with quiet confidence. He always seemed in control of every situation. Yet as he stared at the photograph, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a father carrying a pain he could never fully leave behind. I immediately stepped back, intending to leave without disturbing him. Unfortunately, Leonard noticed me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he gave a small smile and motioned toward an empty chair. I hesitated before sitting down. The photograph rested between us. The young woman looked happy, confident, and full of life. Leonard glanced at the picture before speaking. Her name was Elena. His voice remained calm, but sadness lingered beneath every word. I listened quietly as he explained. Elena was his daughter. She had been intelligent, ambitious, and passionate about education. While many people assumed she would eventually run part of the family business, she had different dreams. She wanted to create programs that helped talented students who lacked financial opportunities. Years earlier, she had spent months designing scholarship projects and mentorship programs. Those plans never became reality. One rainy evening, a reckless driver crossed into her lane. The accident took her life before she reached her 23rd birthday. For several seconds, I could not find the right words. The room felt impossibly quiet. Leonard looked down at the photographs scattered across the table. Many showed Elena visiting schools, volunteering with students, and speaking at educational events. Suddenly, many things began to make sense. The scholarship program, the mentorship initiative, the charity events, none of them had started as business projects. They had started as a father's attempt to continue his daughter's dream. Leonard explained that after Elena's death, he buried himself in work. He spent years focusing on business because it was easier than facing grief. Eventually, however, he realized that success meant very little if it could not improve the lives of others. That realization led him back to Elena's unfinished vision. Listening to his story taught me something important. Many people carry struggles that remain invisible to everyone around them. It is easy to admire someone's success without understanding those losses they endured along the way. Compassion becomes easier when we remember that every person is fighting battles we may never see. Before I left, Leonard shared one final truth. The reason he had paused during our first interview was because I reminded him of Elena, not in appearance, but in determination. According to him, I spoke about education with the same sense of purpose that had driven his daughter years earlier. His words left me speechless. A week later, the national competition reached its final stage. Students from across the country gathered inside a large auditorium. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Although I felt prepared, uncertainty still followed me onto the stage. I knew the competition would be difficult. Several projects were outstanding. When my turn arrived, I focused on sharing my vision as clearly as possible. I explained how mentorship could help students overcome barriers that money alone could not solve. Many talented young people simply needed guidance, encouragement, and access to opportunities that others often took for granted. When my presentation ended, the audience applauded warmly. I returned to my seat feeling relieved. Regardless of the outcome, I knew I had given my best effort. Hours later, the judges returned with their final decision. As they announced the winner, I heard my name echo through the auditorium. For a moment, everything felt unreal. The months of stress, uncertainty, and hard work flashed through my mind. I remembered the university cashier shaking her head. I remembered the tuition deadline. I remembered wondering whether my education would end before it truly began. Now I stood on a stage, accepting an award that would allow my project to become reality. The funding helped launch the mentorship network the following year. What started as a small quickly expanded across multiple universities. Hundreds of students joined the program. Many found internships, scholarships, and career opportunities they never believed possible. Watching those success stories unfold became one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Shortly before graduation, Leonard invited me to a small ceremony at the foundation headquarters. There, surrounded by students, educators, and community leaders, he announced a new name for the scholarship program.
The Elena Graves Scholarship.
As applause filled the room, Leonard looked toward the audience with quiet pride. For the first time since meeting him, the sadness I often saw in his eyes seemed lighter. Not gone, but lighter. A few months later, I graduated with honors. My parents sat in the front row, smiling through tears as I crossed the stage. Their sacrifices had brought me to that moment. Their belief in me had carried me through every challenge. That evening, after the celebrations ended, I found myself thinking about how differently life could have unfolded. 10 days before losing my place at university, everything had seemed hopeless, yet one opportunity had changed the direction of my future. Looking back, I realized that the most valuable thing Leonard ever gave me was not financial support. It was belief. Sometimes a single person's believing in your potential can change everything. And as I began the next chapter of my life, I hoped to offer that same belief to others. Because opportunities may open doors, but people help us find the courage to walk through them. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share. Subscribe for more emotional English stories and listening practice.